Okay, welcome back to episode 4. As I was saying, I'm saving this return ship slash Gillilander as a sub-assembly so I can attach it to the Eve mothership. And I'm doing that by sticking it on top of a heat shield decoupler. And I'm making sure that I have probe control on it, although I forget the antenna later on, so it doesn't really matter that much. And then I'm sticking some reaction wheels and batteries on the transfer stage so that I can turn the ship and it won't take an hour each time. And I'm also adding some very large separation motors to the boosters because, you know, after a certain size, it's reasonable to want to use fleas instead of separatrons, so you don't have like 50 separatrons per vehicle. That just gets annoying to use in staging. So now I'm time warping to the Eve window, which is actually pretty close, and liftoff of another spaghetti rocket. There seems to be a recurring theme here. This one's piloted by Val. She's not going back to Val. And, you know, this whole thing's bouncing around like craziness, so I just revert to vehicle assembly building for once and add a lot of struts. And this comes back to bite me, as you may have heard in the previous video. And again, sorry for the yawns. It took a lot longer to edit this one. It's like 11:23 right now. And in order to prevent the flipping, I'm literally making humongous fins, like something out of, you know, 40s, 50s. Well, was there sci-fi in the 40s? Like space sci-fi? I don't know. There had to be at least a little bit. You know, the classic, you know, they sort of looked like V2 fins. Anyway, so liftoff again of the Eve ship. And this time it goes much better. I go too steep on the gravity turn, but that's okay because I have the extra fuel to make up for it, and it gets me out of the atmosphere faster, which means that it's faster overall, and a lovely booster separation, and a lovely flip of the spaghetti rocket. It's still slightly spaghetti. I just, the auto struts are going from bottom to top, so everything in the middle is free to jiggle around. Anyway, so we're in orbit now, and I'm making the maneuver to Eve, as you probably know. And if you happen to be new to the game, which you probably aren't, seeing as you're watching this video and you literally watched an hour and a half of it already, Eve is the hardest planet to land on and return from. I mean, besides Jewel, but you really can't land on Jewel. It's a gas giant. I'm trying, though. I'm actually trying to make a dual ascent vehicle, and it's working fairly well, but, you know, that's a story for another time. So I get my Eve encounter in just a few moments here. After, never mind. In more than a few moments, I have to make a course correction burn. And the thing is, I need to come in at the inclination of Gilly, so it's easier to get to Gilly. Except, you know, I'm coming in literally the opposite inclination. Like, Gilly's like, what, 20 degrees above, I'm coming in 20 degrees below, so... Hopefully I have the fuel to correct it. And I'm doing the correction burn, which puts me really close to the planned trajectory. And time warp again. Hey Sarah? Can you come here, like, just tell me something to talk about when there's a long time warp? Like, especially the Elu one, I need to have something to talk about, because I'm not good at randomly making stuff up.
I just had it.
What's
the next big project that you plan to do?
Next big project?
Huh?
Like how? Like what sort of big project?
Anything, like any big project that you're gonna do on your computer.
On the computer. Well, if you
any device, whatever it is.
Whatever. Next big project. Oh, that's a good question. I'll be thinking about that for a while. Anyway, so. This is the course correction for the Elu mission. And I'm so far out that it's really hard to adjust precisely, so I think I just end up leaving it. And we are 6 hours and 19 minutes in. So I, again, make a quick save and go back to the Eve mission. it'd be a lot easier to have these missions running at the same time if I had Kerbal Alarm Clock installed. But again, this is a stock speedrun, so I wrote the days down on a piece of paper, and I hoped I wouldn't forget about them. So, anyway, so we're at Eve, and we are burning into an orbit with an apoapsis around Gilly. And then I'm doing the plane change maneuver there, and I actually managed to get an encounter with Gilly, which is really rare. Like, it's hard to get one accidentally. So I say, hey, I should go there first, and then I realize later on that I shouldn't, because that actually used a lot of braking fuel, because I'm traveling at like almost 1 kilometer per second relative to Gilly, so it would be really impractical to slow down only to have to speed up again, and fuel in the transfer stage is running a lot lower than I'd like. Now, this is where the big fail fest starts. Not right now, but in about 5 in-game minutes. So I reduce my apoaps to just above the atmosphere, and then I retro burn into a low Eve orbit, or a low-ish Eve orbit, and I flip around once or twice because this is still very much a spaghetti rocket. I think I have a 0.625 meter parts supporting that entire top section, and then there's 1.25 meter parts supporting the entire Eve lander, I think. So there's very much weak joints in there. Anyway, I quick load and try and do the retro burn again because I did it really inefficiently with all those slips and stuff, and I was running it low on fuel. Apogee coming down. You know, like, I should do more of this, honestly. Like, I'm not sure if you're enjoying it. Like, tell me if you're enjoying this sort of commentary format, because I'm actually really enjoying doing it. Just, like, talking about something, but also talking about other things in the meantime. It's very, like, refreshing compared to my other video formats, which require a lot of editing, like multiple hours. So it's very refreshing. So what you just saw there was I detached the Gilly lander to put it, and return ship to put it into a low Eve orbit, because I ran out of fuel on the actual mothership, so it's still very much in an elliptical-ish orbit. And the Eve ascent vehicle can only reach a low Eve orbit, so I don't want to be stuck there. That's what I'm saying. Unfortunately, like, on the way back, I had to do EVA rendezvous several times in order to get it right, because at those distances, it's weird. Anyway, so I'm back in the ship, and this is where the mistakes start. I deorbit onto the big landmass thinking, oh hey, that should be high enough to take off from safely, and I enter the atmosphere, make sure I have temperature gauges on, and entry goes fairly well. And I overshoot the crater that I was aiming for, however. That was the high and mountainous area. And then I notice I'm coming down next to some lakes, which means that it's very close to sea level. And this thing was not meant to take over. And I also burn off my heat shield, so I have to try that part again. Jettisoning the bottom heat shield is pretty difficult, so I end up facing straight down and then detaching it. And I try and use the wings for cross-range capability, but the whole thing wants to flip backwards, so I end up flying it backwards. And I try and get towards a mountain, and I fail, so I eventually deploy the parachutes about now, and managed to land safely on Eve. I thought I was going to crash there for a second, and I get out. The lander's sliding downhill, but that always happens with Eve landers, really. Plant a flag, get back in, do a whole bunch of quick saves, transfer the crew, detach that, and I'm only at 700 meters above sea level, so you can see where this is going to go. I take off, adjust things, and then I end up tipping over too far down the early atmosphere, so I try quick loading to try again, and I do that. I do about the same thing as before, but by like 7 kilometers up, I've used half my fuel, and then I try and tip over, except the struts on the top of the rocket are producing about twice as much drag as the rocket usually would. So it tips over a lot more than it did during testing, which means that I have to go up further before gravity turning or just stay in line more. So I run out of fuel, and I work on quick saves. I try to go back to a quick save that I have in orbit, and look for quick save, but I don't have any quick saves of before the EVA rendezvous, so I have to redo the entire EVA rendezvous again, I think, or just try and get the ascent vehicle to work. So I try and say, okay, I can do this, so I try and get the ascent vehicle to work from that low altitude. Spoiler alert, I don't get it to work. So a word of advice to A, my future self, and B, anyone else who wants to do a speed run of Kerbal Space Program, make sure that you don't put struts on your EVA, or make sure you land at a high altitude. It doesn't have to be the highest mountain. Honestly, like 3-4 kilometers up is probably good for this lander. And add cross-range capability to your lander and test it beforehand. I mean, obviously you can't transfer craft files in, but like make one that's easy to build, like I tried to do here. So here again, I try and do the exact same thing, like landing on the exact same continent, but re-entering either a bit earlier or a bit later. I think it's earlier. So I detach everything, I enter the atmosphere again, and re-entry goes pretty well. I overshoot the crater again, which I didn't want to do. Now, one thing I will say about my Eve lander design is, like, I don't mean to brag or anything, but it's a great design. Like, especially, like, I mean, obviously there's more efficient ways to do it, there's lighter ways to do it, but mostly the heat shield setup is what I'm really proud of. It's just mostly straightforward to jettison the heat shields. Like all the other Eve landers I built, I try jettisoning the heat shields 10 times and it works once. This time I've tried twice and it's worked once, and I don't think it fails again, but I'm not sure. It might fail at least one more time, but still, that's 50%. That's way better than anything I've ever done before, which is mostly in part due to the fairing nodes, which are an incredibly useful feature. And this time, I think I undershoot the crater that had the high mountains, so I still try and land again, and I'm aiming for a mountain range, except, you know, oh look, it exploded. Try jettisoning the heat shield, it works this time, and I try and use my cross-range capability to aim for the mountains, but then I start tumbling because of all the weird draggy bits, and I fly backwards again, which is again probably due to the struts that I added after testing. So I look around and I try and find the highest mountain I can just by looking at it, and pop the chutes, pop more chutes, and 1,500 meters, still definitely not ideal, but twice as good as last time. Eve with a question mark is the caption I put on my flag. Transfer valve to the command pod, detach the things, quick save, and lift off, which is again, like, I'm pointed slightly sideways, so it doesn't really... And again, I've used half my fuel by 7 kilometers, so I must be doing something wrong. And I throttle up at the last moment, and out of fuel by 30 kilometers, and my apogee is not very high, so I still try and burn, but I lose most of my speed due to drag. I don't even remember if I get into space or not. But, yeah, I get into space. And then I realized that I'm not going to make it because I still have a kilometer per second to go, and the EVA packs can only go 600 meters per second. So I quick load again, and get back into orbit, and try and do my descent a third time, and then I realize there's no good land on this continent. I'm going to try another continent. So, from the start of the failures, it took me like 30 minutes to realize that I should just aim for that, like, mass. Like, beneath the giant impact crater, there's a lot of good mountains. There's a lot of lakes as well, but if you have any cross-range capability, it's easy to aim for a high spot. So, I deorbit this time, and I make sure to remember my quick saves, because the quick saves is one thing that really did me in last time. I had to redo a bunch of stuff, I think. So I'm re-entering again, and I undershoot the spot I was aiming for, but I still find a good mountain nearby. So I jettison the heat shield with a blast of the engines to hopefully push it away and or destroy it. And I was going to aim for the mountain to the left, but I found out that once the lander stabilized, I could only go for the lander on the right. Not the lander, the mountain on the right. And at just under 7 hours in, we successfully land on Eve at about 3,700 meters above sea level, which is, at least in testing, it was enough to make the proper ascent. And I realized that I left Val in the command pod, so I have to, the command pod download that I used to actually EVA out, so I transfer it back and quick load again. And as I'm ascending for the final time, I think there's a cut in there where I don't actually... oh, wait, never mind. So, just wait. 7 hours in, yay. And that was the fairing exploding, which due to heating and the aerodynamics didn't work out so well. So I'm ascending, and I think it's right about now-ish. I accidentally alt-tabbed out of the game. No, not now. Okay. I failed the ascent because of the struts again, but somewhere in here there's a cut because I accidentally pressed the Windows key. And that stopped the recording, so I had to really quickly jump back into the game and restart it. So yeah, I think that was it right there. Anyway, so first stage is out of fuel, deploy the fairing after quick saving, and then I do the last 2 stages, which are mostly vacuum optimized. And in the testing, I was able to make orbit without using the EVA pack, but probably due to the extra struts and the extra drag, I wasn't able to. So eventually, using most of the fuel in the EVA pack, I make it to a stable low EVE orbit. Well, actually, not most of the fuel, just under half of the fuel. So now, I could do a rendezvous, but that would use the fuel. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually time warping until a spot where the 2 orbits mostly intersect, and then I'll go from there. So I save time. It's also a time saver because you can't time warp very fast in low EVE orbit, which is why I went to the tracking station. 7 hours, 6 minutes in, which means that there's an hour until the record, and I have 2 planets left to land on. Well, not planets, but bodies. Elu and Gilly, and I still have to get back to the mothership, which I'm doing right now, and I have a very close intercept after using another quarter unit of EVA fuel. And I'm going back to I'm just arriving now at the EVE, well, did I say mothership earlier? This is just the return craft. It's not very mothershipy, it's just pathetic. So I'm trying to set up an encounter with Gilly, which I get. And it's not very important to fine-tune your Gilly encounters because it's Gilly. It's really hard to get any closer than you already are. And Gilly's sphere of influence is pretty tiny. Although in real life, because your spheres of influence are basically the middle point between 2 gravity wells, Gilly's sphere of influence would actually shrink and grow through its orbit in real life because it gets closer and further away to Eve because it's an elliptical orbit. You know, I don't know exactly who's watching this, but if you're a Kerbal player, you probably know this, and I crashed into Gilly. Rip Val. But, you know, sometimes I try to explain orbital mechanics to some people. They don't get it a lot. But, you know, probably because of the barrier, it's rocket science. It actually isn't that complicated once you get it. Most people can't get it. So anyway, I'm landing on Gilly now. 7 hours and 13 minutes in. Plant a flag, get back in, and take off again. So, hi Gilly, bye Gilly. Good riddance. Sarah's waving at me like a maniac right now. Redeploy the solar panels before time warping some more back to the Eve to Kerbin window. That's a cool view, and it was cooler in real time, though. And just waiting for the transfer window back to Kerbin. And I'm there, so I can do the maneuver, except I'm late, I think. Wait, okay, I forget. I might have had to eyeball this window, but I don't think I did. Yeah, I'm working on it. Yeah, this one was eyeballed. Entirely, completely eyeballed. Because I had run out of windows on the list. And there's the Kerbin encounter, so I warp to the next maneuver, which is actually orbits this far up take like a few weeks. So Val is just sitting around in our pod, minding her own business. You know, I sort of feel somewhat sorry for, I know they're just computer characters, but if I would sit in a tin can that small for several years, I know Kerbals are slightly smaller than humans, so they can actually fit in there, but even scaling up appropriately, I'd probably go crazy in just a few days. Which is actually interesting I mentioned that, because earlier I mentioned about trying to just sit in a cardboard box for a while and try and live there for a few days. That's actually something that I had conceptualized that I might do this summer. Act like I'm in a space mission in a cardboard box. The only problem I can foresee is, bathroom. Not a good thing to have to do in a cardboard box. Anyway, so we're back on Kerbin, and because I don't have to actually recover the craft to get money or science or anything, I can just EVI out and use the new personal parachutes to get down to the surface faster. And now we're time warping to Elu. So the big thing I'm planning on doing this summer, again, is going to Europe to play trombone, which is going to be really awesome. I think we're going to 7 different countries, and oh yay, the time warp's over, I don't have to talk about anything. But the problem is, I time warped way too far, and I missed my Elu periapsis, and I don't want to have to quick load and time warp all that way again, so I decided that I have enough fuel, and it's quicker to just do all the 2 kilometers per second of burn, just to get into elliptical Elu orbit from here. Now, we don't have the Oberth effect on our side, but I still managed to do it after a while. So another exciting thing that happened is NASA found out, they released 2 pieces of information today. One is that they found, I think it was amino acids on Mars, which is definitely big news as far as the search for life goes. And another thing is they found out that the methane, whatever you want to call it, I don't know how it's pronounced, again.
Pronunciation!
It follows a seasonal cycle in terms of its abundance in Mars's atmosphere. Which, again, methane means that either there's just some there somehow, or it's probably, it could be evidence of either recent life or current life, which is, again, big news. 7 hours and 30 minutes in, and we're on Elu! Yay, the last body. So now we have about 36 minutes left before we won't get the record. And we just quickly go there. I was really feeling, like, stressed at this point. Like, it was dinner time, and I was out here frantically clicking and typing away while my family ate. And I'm doing a rendezvous. I'm like purposely burning downward and forward, so I'm going in a faster orbit that's not really in classical orbit, so I can get to the mothership faster, because I have a lot of fuel left over, and I really don't need to use this lander again. So I'm there, and I board the return ship, and one thing I noticed in the transfer window planner when I was writing down transfer windows, there is a reasonable transfer window from Elu to Kerbin all the time. Like, there may not be a perfect one all the time, but it's so far out that you can go slightly upward for not as much delta V, but you'll get like a few months extra transfer time. But yeah, you can always go home from Elu to Kerbin and not have to worry about a transfer window, and it'll still be a reasonable amount of fuel. So that was very useful in planning of this mission. So I did the burn wrong though, so I need to do a correction. And I'm there. And now I'm time warping several years, so I can actually talk about what I'm going to do this summer. Besides Europe, I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do this summer, like this big project. You know, I've always wanted to try and release an album. Call me crazy, because, you know, most of the songs that I write originally, in my opinion, are absolutely super cringy. And so, and I tried recording one a long time ago. It ended up pretty bad, so I re-recorded, and I thought it was great, and it still ended up pretty bad. But, you know, part of that was the microphone, part of that was that it was super repetitive. Yeah. And then since I've done a few, like, random one-off piano covers, but I have songs that I've written that are decent-ish. Who am I kidding? They're probably pretty bad. But I might just try it, at least doing a few songs. I should, yeah. Especially now that I have a better microphone to record stuff on. This thing right here. You know, that'd be really bad if it wasn't recording right now. I'll check. I'm recording this using Audacity. Yep, it's recording, and I don't know how to pronounce it. Anyway, so we're almost at the maneuver node finally, and that's all the time I have to talk about that. Sarah, what else should I talk about?
Talk about if you had to play a sport, which one and why?
Oh boy, this is a long thing. I don't really do sports. I don't like
None of us do.
doing physical activity, but some reason I'm still not overweight, and for some reason I sort of have abs, even though I don't like work out or anything. Yeah, I'm like looked upon as, you know, that nerdy guy, so, you know, they're surprised when I can actually do stuff. There was this one time in school where this Marines guy came in with a pull-up bar, and like everyone can only do like 1, 2, or 3 or something like that, except for like one really athletic guy who did like 18, and I'm like, oh, what's the worst that can happen? Everyone will laugh at me. So I went up there and I managed 10, and everyone was like, whoa. So yeah, anyway, so
Can I talk
but if I had to play a sport, let's see, does foursquare count as a sport? Probably not. I have experience with baseball, but you know, I stopped because I kept getting hit in the face too much. I have a bad like tendency to get hit in the face with balls. Oh hey, my cat's right here, right as I'm returning to Kerbin. 7 hours and 48 minutes in. Jessie, meow. Are you gonna see my return? And I think I actually filmed this part on a physical camera, so I might switch to that right now, or I might keep the commentary. I'm coming in very fast. We're entering. 7 hours, 49 minutes, 40 seconds, 50 seconds. Parachutes, personal parachute, and Jeb is on Kerbin. 7 hours, 50 minutes, and 39 seconds, everyone. Except I actually didn't, this doesn't count for the official speedrun, unfortunately, because I thought the timer stopped when you land on Kerbin. The timer actually stops when you recover Kerbin. So the actual time for the record is probably 2 to 3 minutes more, because I just sat here and let it record while I celebrated. So 2 3 minutes longer than that, and that's my speedrun. I'm going to do a follow-up video on whether or not this speedrun should count towards the official record, because I did accidentally bend the rules in some spots. But anyway, thank you very much for watching. It means a lot. Just the fact that there are so many people watching. Well, just the fact that you're listening right now. Jesse's about to sit on the keyboard, so I'm gonna stop and the audio right now. So yeah, thank you, and yeah, I'll be doing this again sometime. Have a great day, and bye.